Warning, this podcast will probably feature spoilers for many, many episodes of Doctor Who.
Can I just say, I have been resisting this entire episode to not say the Havery Gavery joke that you posted on your Twitter today. Because I saw this and I knew we were going to be recording today, and I'm like, fuck. Should I say this during recording?
I am open to the Havery Gavery. That post is not a joke. I want people to greet me that way.
No, you need to do that on the Jack Harkness episode.
Yes.
We need to save
we all
for
stand
that.
our pansexual lord, Jack Harkness.
You're listening to the Back to the TARDIS podcast, a retrospective podcast discussing every episode of the ongoing 2005 revival of BBC's Doctor Who. Today's episode is Season 1, Episode 1, Rose.
I think it's probably just best to sort of introduce ourselves, names, pronouns, and I guess prior history with the show.
So who's going first?
Okay, since I started the awkward silence. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for volunteering.
So, hello, internet. My name is Skyler. I am I'm 21. I'm a trans girl, so she, her pronouns, please. And my history with the show, basically, I started watching it at the behest of one of my middle school friends, and I think the first full episode I watched was a Series 7A episode called A Town Called Mercy.
Oh, God.
Well, okay. There are worse places you can start.
I mean,
there are worse
that's
places.
not an ideal place to start, though.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's also not the worst episode, so it's a decent episode.
Yeah, I had like no idea. I mean, I knew the iconography. I knew like the box. I knew like Matt Smith was the doctor at the time, so I knew like his shtick and everything. But that was that was my introduction, and then I just kind of like hopped around reruns on BBC America. They most of the time they just played 11th Doctor stuff because that's what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until later that I went back and like watched from the beginning, probably around like the small hiatus they took between 7A and 7B is when I kind of caught myself up. But that's my history with the show.
All right. Avery, you can go next.
Yes, I am Avery. I use she, her pronouns too. And I mean, I actually started watching it around that same time. I think I started watching it before 7A came out. And I caught up to it before that. I remember watching 7A, or I think I caught up to it like a bit after 7A finished, and then I watched 7B when it came out, and then I've been watching the seasons ever since. And I've rewatched it a couple times, but it's been a long time since I've rewatched it, so I'm pretty rusty, especially on a lot of the earlier stuff, since I mostly watched like sort of 11 and 12's runs for the most part.
All right. I'm Jeff. I am 18, and I use he, him pronouns. I have a very long history with this show. So my parents were, my parents are nerds for one thing, but for another thing, my dad grew up in England during the 70s and 80s, so he was actually, watching the original show live when episodes were airing back in the days of the even dodgier special effects. And I think my mom had catched some episodes on PBS too, so they knew about the show. My first episode, God, I don't know what it was. I think it was like something in season 2, and I wasn't watching it. My parents were watching it on BBC America. And whatever it was, I'm pretty sure I was terrified of it because it took several years for me to actually get into the show. Like, my parents were and still are and have been fans, but I just remember at like 6 just like constantly just like diving behind the couch or like out of the room. I'm like, because I was like, no, I'm not doing this.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah. So I eventually started. I think it was between seasons 5 and 6 because I think my parents had just gotten the season 5 box set on DVD, and I managed to eventually, I guess, get over my own fear enough to get in and, I guess, sort of binge the show over a few months, and it became 8-year-old Jeff's newest obsession. Well, not 8, like 9 or 10, but yeah. So I've been into the show for a while. I've not always been the biggest fan of it. I especially just kind of dropped off. Like, season 6 I dropped off a little, and early Capaldi I dropped off a little. But I've always sort of had just kind of like a baseline care and interest in the show. And so I've rewatched it a bunch of times, though my expertise is more Tenant era. But yeah.
So yeah, you want to get into the episode now?
Yeah. So this episode is exceedingly well paced.
It's like it's well written, and I was genuinely
Yeah.
surprised because my
Yeah.
memories of this season are very hazy, and I sort of just remembered it for the cheese, and then the one good episode, the 2-parter.
Yeah.
And then I sort of forgot that, like, oh yeah, it like it kept running because it was well written. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And just to remind, like, the show had been dead for like 15 years, aside from the one TV movie where Paul McGann got horribly shafted. He was way good, but all his good stuff is in like expanded universe material, like audio dramas and stuff. I feel sorry for the guy.
Yeah. And that wasn't the only uphill battle too. Like, when news came out that they were going to revive the show and that the showrunner was the guy who headed up Queer as Folk, and that wasn't really anything like Doctor Who. And then when there was the casting announcement of Billie Piper, apparently she got a lot of like fan harassment back in the day.
Yeah, because I mean she's I think Doctor Who actually is part of the reason why like many people know her as an actress. She was like a pop star in Britain at the time, I believe. So yeah, it was a huge uphill battle. It's interesting to realize that it's fun to realize, like, when you look back at the fan culture around Doctor Who at the time, like in between those years, it had like a really heavy LGBTQ following, and that kind of those people became the creative team for the reboot, which is that's pretty sweet. So yeah, it like nobody really expected it to come back, but it did, and I think the fact that it came back with a really strong episode that's like, okay, it's been 15 years. We have 45 minutes to reintroduce the Doctor, introduce a new character, and just all these elements in a way that is a perfect, accessible jumping on point for newcomers, but also has plenty for old fans. That's really hard to do. And while I don't think this is anywhere near the show's best episode, it's a really good episode, and I can't believe it manages to pull off what it pulls off in as short a time as it pulls it off.
And I'm sort of interested in the Billy Piper being a pop star thing. I remember hearing that, and it makes a lot more sense like rewatching the episode now because the opening sort of sequence, with her waking up and the alarm clock, and then just like going out into the world and all the quick shots and all the quick shots and montage. It's very much reminiscent of like a pop music video of the era or like a teen drama of the era. And it sort of like
No,
makes sense for her.
it's very not Doctor Who, but it works because it sets up that this character is mundane. They're not a companion yet. They're not a traveler yet.
Yeah, there's I don't know how well this term translates to outside the UK. Even I don't have a full understanding of what it means, but I've heard Rose Tyler sometimes be described as like a chav, which
that fits,
in terms of
I
older,
think she's even called that in universe by like Cassandra at one point.
yes, and the fact that like I don't know how many previous Doctor Who companions like in Classic Who could even be compared to that, but the fact that
the only one that I can think of would maybe be like Ace.
Yeah, it's like it's a new dynamic, but you start with her.
Yeah, they do tend to be if they're from modern Earth, they do tend to be middle class in Classic Who. From I don't have the foremost knowledge of Classic Who. I've watched a decent amount of Classic Who stories, but I'm not like that's not my complete area of expertise at all.
So yeah, I think just the very beginning of the episode, it sort of sets up a new tone for the show, and I think it's also like just as much reintroducing Britain as a setting as like 2000s Britain as opposed to its previous settings of like several decades prior. And I think that's just sort of the setup of the episode and setting the tone for who the character is and like what the new dynamic is.
Yeah, it's not just reintroducing Earth, it's introducing this idea that Earth was focused, like Earth showed up in previous Classic Who stuff, like it was a setting, and Third Doctor especially spent a lot of time on Earth because for plot reasons he was grounded. But I think the reboot especially, and this is something that I think Russell T Davies did that I think was a wise decision, is he and his showrunners after that, both Moffat and Chibnall, have kept the show far more grounded to Earth and far more grounded to humanity than Classic Who ever was.
And I think that's like I think that's a theme you sort of start seeing in this episode. Like, just straight away, you start seeing that dynamic there of like keeping the Doctor grounded. I mean, because like plot wise, he's just come out of the Time War and he's sort of just like spaced out and he's very focused on like this large picture narrative of the universe and like, I have to protect everyone. Like, I can't worry about individuals. And I think you sort of, later on in the episode, you start to see that dynamic play out of like, no, you have to refocus on like the worth of individual humans. And that's something that like plays out across the entirety of New Who.
Yeah, and and also it's interesting. I don't know where I found this, and if I can find this, I'll like put it in show notes or something. But I distinctly remember Russell T Davies saying in an interview that the deliberate sort of highlighting of humanity, even if it's not on Earth, having humans as central characters in most episodes, was his idea to keep things more sort of tied to empathetic, tied to our sense of empathy. Like he felt that we wouldn't care as much if it was just all aliens, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I also can't remember as many sort of standout non-companion alien characters from Classic Who.
It's a safe decision.
Like even the alien characters in New Who are a lot more sort
Human.
of human. Yeah.
It's a safe decision from the perspective of reintroducing a show. And as we can see from the fact that new Doctor Who is coming out in 2020, it obviously worked in keeping the show around a while.
Yeah, no, huge props to Russell T Davies for basically bringing the show back to the dead. And everyone else on the team, Julie Gardner, I know especially, was huge. a huge participant in helping get it back.
Yeah. So do you want to sort of like get into the plot now? Like,
Are we just gonna like, man? This is a new show. I don't know how this format is working. Are we just gonna kind of go through the plot, or are we just gonna like throw it at things that we like about the episode, or things that we think are funny? The CGI.
I mean, we can sort of just like go through the plot and then like go back over it if you want,
Yeah.
because I think we sort of set up the
Yeah.
context for the show being reintroduced and the very opening shots of the show, and so I think we can sort of get into the monsters.
Yeah, that first scene. Yeah, that first scene where it's really going through. Now, I have to say, I think bringing the Autons back as like this is our grand reintroduction to the show is a good idea. Some historical context, the Autons were actually, I think, the Third Doctor's first story. And they're effective because they're low budget, but they're still creepy. Like, they're practical, they're low budget, and they work because they're everywhere. Like, I remember being like 9 and being skeeved out whenever mom was like, we should go shopping for like 2 weeks. I was like, Mom, you really gonna do this to me? Like, it still works.
It's goofy as fuck, though.
Yeah, it's goofy, but it works. Like, just the shots at like the end of the episodes where they all break through the windows and come out. That's it's taken straight from Classic Who, but it still works.
And I think what's interesting in like the sort of the shots introducing them again, like as Rose is like going through that hallway, and then she gets like attacked by the Autons. Like it's very, I see it as sort of like a midpoint between old Who and like where we're at now. Because
Yeah.
like a lot of
it's very you know what it is. It's or at least I'm thinking this is where he got the idea from. Russell T Davies is a huge Joss Whedon and Buffy fan. I think that might have been sort of where that idea came from.
Yeah, I can see that vibe there.
Yeah. Also, a large thing that I think helps not just the introduction of the aliens, but also the whole show, this whole first episode, because let's be real, like the CGI is a little bit wonky, everything. Everything
it's so bad. It's great.
Exactly.
It's great. The explosion is like
we can get to the explosion. I love it so much.
It's a shitty CG fireball. Yippee!
Yeah, it's.
Also, can we just talk about for a second that this is a crowded department store in the middle of like a metropolitan area that explodes from a bomb, and like there isn't like huge state of emergency police threat. Like, this is a post 9/11 episode. Like, how
it makes it clear with a comment later, and I want to get to that because I find it very entertaining.
Yeah, I was just gonna quickly mention that I think the music, I believe Murray Gold started.
Gold, yes.
Who has been stayed on from like at this point until like the end of the Capaldi era. His stuff definitely elevates this episode.
He was replaced with a new guy for Chibnall. Yeah. No, Murray Gold's scoring is pretty universally good, and I say that as someone who has purchased his music long ago. It's still on my mom's iTunes account somewhere.
I think the soundtrack in this episode is just like very interesting. It's like it's pretty different from where the soundtrack for the show ends up later with sort of like the orchestral sound.
Yeah.
In this episode, it's very sort of like electro funk kind of.
Yeah, kind of grungy electronic, very sort of modern. There's also a really nice touch where kind of the kind of fast-paced electronic piece that's playing over the intro scenes is playing diegetically in the store where Rose is working.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting the way this early episode sort of like it can dramatize just like random silly moments. Because there's that scene later, where the doctor's getting choked by the hand, and it's clearly just Eccleston is just like holding the hand.
Yeah, no, it's so
and the music gets so intense.
Stupid.
The music gets so intense.
I remember, like, I think, like, I don't remember everything about my first viewing. I have an interesting story about my first viewing that I'll talk about later. But I remember when I watched this, like, it was like a whole like okay, we're gonna watch some Doctor Who, Jeff. Gather around the TV. We got dinners and trays and such. And I distinctly remember going behind the couch at that point, and I find it so funny because it's not even remotely scary. It's so cheesy.
Yeah, or I think just getting to the next bit, like after we first see the Autons, and then they're like running away, going up the lift, and
oh god, the one, like the line, like I know you were messaging in the Discord about like, oh man, this is funny. I really like the establishing character moment where they're in the lift and she's trying to rationalize it. It's students. He's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's students. It's not students. And then he just walks out.
No, there's another line before that, and this is what I think is sort of just like a very important establishing moment for this new Doctor, because she goes like, whoever they are, like when Wilson finds them, he's gonna call the police, and he goes,
Wilson's
"Who's
dead."
Wilson? The chief electrician. Wilson's dead."
Yeah, just walks out. Yeah, he's so good, and we only got him for 13 episodes.
And that makes me sad now, because he gets sort of a bad rap nowadays. But like going back to these episodes, he's very funny. Like his delivery is so good. It's very like he very much plays the straight man in the episodes, which is like the opposite of later incarnations, and it's a very interesting dynamic.
It's interesting too, because it's actually, no, I'd argue it's like this weird thing of straight man where technically Rose is the straight man, or in this case straight woman, of the duo, but because he's entirely deadpan, he comes off as it too.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
This episode's got a very good kind of contrast between the mundane finding the extraordinary and someone finding the extraordinary extremely mundane. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna blow up this department store. Don't mind me. Laters.
What really works is that Eccleston, as the Ninth Doctor, even in his establishing scene that we see like him for such a short amount of time, but definitely later when he's having the first long conversation he has with Rose, he does such a perfect balance.
Yeah, no, the I can feel the world turning speech. That's such a good speech.
Yes, it's so inspirational and emotional, and you feel like this guy that there's something more going on to him. And then when he turns around, you can see his face. There's like this mixture of like maybe fury or seriousness or something about himself that he's clearly hiding from Rose. And in that moment, because I distinctly remember not really ever noticing that before. So yeah, as I said, the fact that we got him for one series and he's still like so remembered and so talked about to this day, it all starts in this episode, in my opinion.
And especially I think one thing to point out is sort of his manicness and his smiles. Like you can kind of tell that he's projecting because he's actually interacting with another person, but you can tell that it's not entirely authentic. Like you can tell that he's like he's pushing himself to be like overly manic because he's interacting with someone else.
And I think that goes back to the idea of like he needs to be regrounded, because he's been off like fighting a war at this point, and he's just like completely lost it, and he doesn't like remember how to interact with people anymore.
Can I just say the one scene that I don't like and is just like, okay, just being horny on main, I guess. The scene where Jackie comes on.
I love that scene. Fuck you.
Well, here's the thing. I'm just like, what is the purpose of that scene? She's already had like so much establishing character moments that it's just like, why?
Can I mention something really quick? I noticed it in this episode, but I feel like Doctor Who has gotten a lot more sanitized in some way, because I noticed like how Mickey interacts with Rose. Like he slaps her butt. There's like mentions of bedroom play. They kiss. There's the whole thing with Jackie, and I'm looking forward to this season. And I'm just, or not even series 12, but like series 11. It was just like, what has there been? I feel like there hasn't been like any type of like serious romance outside of Amy and Rory.
Considerably less horny on main recently. And it's weird because
My
Stephen
disappointment.
Moffat like swings very rapidly between completely sanitized and just like, dude, chill. Like, this is the same person that did, oh god, with the one Sherlock episode back before the show was god awful. It was in like season 2 or whatever, and especially like season 5 too.
Yeah.
It's I think it drops off a little with Capaldi, which is good because Capaldi is kind of not, that doesn't fit Capaldi's
Makes
character.
sense.
Well, it doesn't fit Eccleston either. That's that's why I really love that interaction.
Well, yeah, but he's not like he's not super. Like 11 is really gung ho a lot of times, and 9's
Yeah.
not, because his entire reaction is just like a deadpan no.
Well, yeah, we can get to that interaction, but like before that, as they're leaving the department store, I think there's this interesting bit where he sort of just tells her to go
Yeah.
away, and I think that's good because he's like driving people off. And I'm saying this because it connects back to the scene you're talking about, where he comes to their house and he rejects Rose's mother's advances, and it's sort of like he's trying to distance himself from people, which is why I think it's a good interaction because it's indicative of his character. You know, it's also just really stupid. I think it's really stupid, and I love it. So
But
fuck you.
No, I will say the apartment, the scenes in the apartment is pretty good, especially the one where it manages to combine Rose sort of expositioning with him just kind of walking around and interacting with the environment, and that tells so much.
It's also the scene where we get the whole like miniature Doctor Who controversy of how long has 9 been around.
Yeah, no, it's weird. Other fun thing, that part at the end of the episode where he leaves and then comes back and is like, oh yeah, it's a time machine. Like, didn't they fit every single 9 story that isn't on screen, like, there? Like, in between when he leaves and when he comes back?
Did they really? That's cool.
Yeah. Like
Might be.
100 years pass between that.
Oh, whack.
It's so fucking
I mean,
weird.
here's the thing, like, we basically have to do that post the War Doctor retcon, because beforehand you could just say, oh, he was busy fighting in a war, and like he did a bunch of other things before doing this point, and he never really, had the time to sit down and look at what he. Yeah.
I mean, there was some sort of retcon, I guess, but like you can also see he examines himself in the mirror. Like, he hasn't looked at his face that much, and you could say maybe he's been busy, but to me, I always read it as he's new.
And I think that's also reflected in his character design, as opposed to like basically since Tom Baker, the doctors had been like
minimalism.
I mean, it even says in the transcript. It says like let me get to it. The Doctor has gone modern minimalist. That's what it says in the transcript itself. And I think you can see that because like sort of from Tom Baker onwards in the old Doctors, they'd had this very fun, playful character design with like their outfits.
Even like one first Doctor was kind of like, that's just period appropriate kind of professor upper class gentleman wear, but 2 onward was very much flamboyant costumes.
Yeah, and I think this Doctor, with the long duster is very just. It's very
not the duster, the leather jacket, the beaten leather.
Yeah.
And the very the very distressed kind of travel worn jacket. Yeah,
and it very much fits the like grungy aesthetics of the season.
Interesting side note on extravagant costumes. So everyone knows 6's really god awful, like multicolored vomit coat.
Yeah.
He hated that coat. Like John Nathan Turner made him wear that. He didn't want that. He wanted something more like kind of like Eccleston, or maybe like 8th Doctor, where it's still somewhat fashionable, but it's a lot more understated and darker.
His audio look is a lot better. What they describe it to be, like, I think it's like more like a straight blue. that he has.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just an interesting side note.
Getting into like the next part in the apartment, there's the the arm
Yeah.
scene.
It's so like and this one, like, you know, I kind of think that some of the first season is cheesy not just because, you know, it's a 2005 show with like 2005 CGI. I think some of it was kind of intentionally like, yeah, this is Doctor Who. We have a reputation for being kind of cheesy and silly. And so you get stuff like that. And like, I don't think, like, maybe early on in Tennant, but since like maybe season 3, season 4 on, I don't think the show has ever gotten like that level of cheesy again.
Yeah, it's so
taken
stupid.
itself a lot more seriously.
Part of it is the budget, of course. Once you get to a level of like sheen and like stuff looking good, it's harder to pull that off without things seeming
and the budget
desperate.
steadily goes up through these seasons, but like also Stephen Moffat's aesthetic is a lot more like cleaner and higher budget, whereas I forever hold a soft spot for like the really grungy TARDIS and like the lived in kind of space settings that you get in the RTD run.
Yeah, I love how obvious it is that he's holding the arm.
And he's totally mugging and corpsing, like he is pulling some extravagant faces.
Yeah, and the best part is, like, you know, even Rose is just like, oh yeah, you're just like, stop fooling around, because it's obvious that's what he's doing, but like in universe he's actually not, and it's just like a bunch of layers there. And I think it also goes back to the dynamic you were mentioning earlier, where for the Doctor, like the extravagant is the mundane, and you know, she just sort of doesn't even recognize like what's happening, and he's like not putting on that much of a show because it's just so normal to him.
Yeah, it's so goofy. It's honestly like it's still entertainingly cheesy. Like, I think there are parts in this season which we will get to later on in this show where the cheese is just like, okay, come on, dude. But this is still good.
Agreed.
Also, the whole introduction to this scene where they're just kind of staring at each other through the cat flap.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I love that.
She opens it up and she's like, wait, it's you. And he's like, what are you doing here? She's like, I live here.
Yeah.
And then we get the interaction with the mom you were talking about.
Like, the comedic timing in this episode is astonishingly good.
Agreed. Yeah. And speaking of like camera work and introductions and like framing stuff really well, after all of this stuff that we're talking about, and like the hand is already attacked and he gets it to stop moving and he starts to leave, that scene where it's just like the camera is on them and they're walking and it like keeps going and it's pretty seamless. You just see them go from location to location and the angle doesn't change for like a while. And I was really impressed with that. And it gave us a nice, like, not intense shot, but like consistent shot showing them that like these two people have chemistry. They're not, you know, doctor and companion yet. It's not like that type of thing yet, but you can see like the seeds start to grow.
It's that feeling that you get it a lot through New Who, where he meets someone and he can tell that there's something, and that doesn't always follow through. And in fact, many times it doesn't, especially in the specials, but that's also because they didn't want to get attached to anyone. But yeah. So yeah, and then you get the really good speech about how he can feel the world turn, which we already talked about. And then, okay, just moving on, can I talk about the hilariously bad Photoshop that they did to like try and put him into the Kennedy photo?
That was amazing.
It's so fucking
the Kennedy photo,
fucking bad.
There's this one bit, like in the scene you were talking about where they're sort of walking out, and then like right before the world turns under me speech, where he goes, I mean, all you do is eat chips, go to bed, and watch telly, while all the time underneath you there's a war going on. And I feel like that's like it's sort of a double-edged comic because on the one hand he could be talking about the Time War, but at the same time, since it's 2005, he could very much be talking about the
Yeah.
Iraq War, and I think
Yeah.
it's very like strong commentary there, and it's the sort of thing you don't get in later episodes.
Yeah, no, RTD has a lot of episodes where he is like really, really into like I'm pretty sure there are some pretty based RTD episodes where he's like,
I don't
yeah,
doubt it.
capitalism sucks.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean we got one of those episodes last season with Oxygen. That was 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
With Oxygen.
Yeah.
But like this was very. I mean, this is that joke is very sort of topical, especially in this season. There is a lot of sort of criticism of British politics at that time.
Yeah.
And like the Tony Blair era.
Yeah.
And it's a good little moment.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And imperialism, like not Torchwood the show, but when season 2 covers Torchwood, there's a lot of commentary on imperialism.
And I think that's why the backdrop of the Time War also does serve as an allegory for that of like, oh yeah, there's like we're all sort of war scarred and shit, and like and
this stupid endless conflict that nobody could win.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately still relevant.
Yeah. Can I also just say, for a moment of levity after that brief talk, when you were bringing up that all you do is eat chips and watch telly thing, I was reminded of that one fucking copy pasta of you millennials don't know how to whatever it is.
No, it's you girls born after all girls born after 1993. All they know is be bisexual, twerk, eat hot chip, and or can't cook, eat hot chip, and lie.
Like I don't know why that made me.
No, I thought the exact same thing as I was reading it. All right. Well, getting back to the what was it? What was the next scene?
The bad Photoshop.
Oh yeah, when she goes to see the crazy guy online. I love the little bit where she's like looking it up and you see his website design. And you're just like, yeah, this is definitely like a website somebody in
She's not even using
Google. On their own.
She's not even using fucking Google. How is that possible?
Well, it's because that's a brand.
It's because there's no Google. There's Vor.
There's Vor.
Topical.
Yeah, there's not very much consistency in technology within the
Yeah, they just don't bother.
They make
At least it's not like Red Dwarf level canon.
Yeah, they make up like new search engines for every episode where it's relevant.
Yeah.
My personal headcanon for that is that, there's very minor changes that the Doctor makes through like all his time screwing with, I don't know if we can swear / whatever.
Yeah, we said fuck multiple times. I don't.
Okay, time fuckery, whatever. But like one of those consequences is that just like whoever the billionaire tech mogul happens to be that's creating the new like search website, it's like that's one of the only things that keeps changing. Because we meet one of them in this season with the like Van Staten, and then like now it's this other guy. Like now being like 2020, but yeah. So that's my headcanon. Is just that like weird inane shit like that keeps changing.
God, this episode is 15 years old.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah. This podcast has a long shelf life. You're welcome, internet.
And
you sound like an angry nerd.
There's
angry
only
nerd
been,
moment.
It's 15 years old, but we're on season 12 because the show keeps taking breaks for an entire year. Yeah, no, this is an angry nerd moment. I'm sorry, I do not like the schedule where it just like keeps, like I keep forgetting about the show. Like I did not know that like the show was actually like I knew there was a New Year's special, but I didn't know that was like the first episode of the new season until you came into Discord and were raving about it. I just thought it was a one-off special because I'm used to bullshit schedule. Yeah, but that was for 2019, and that was around the time that season 11 aired.
No.
I'm saying I thought that this was just
I mean that episode was so good
one-off
that it's
special, and then that was it. That we were going to get for like another few months because the schedule's been so fucked. Yeah. Yeah, spoiler alert, that episode is so good that it got us talking about Doctor Who again, which is why we're sitting in a Discord call recording this.
And on that note, what happens next? Oh, right. So, like, she's sort of talking to the guy, and you're like, oh my god, the Doctor's been everywhere. And it sort of implies that, I mean, the Doctor either already has been or will be in all
With
those
terrible
places at some
Photoshop.
point, which I guess sort of implies that this Doctor has been around for a bit already. And it's sort of interesting that, this is the only incarnation this guy has found information about, and not any of the other ones.
It's weird because later on when they do something similar to that, they always show more than one.
Yeah.
But this one only shows Eccleston.
I would like to, there are very few properties I want to George Lucas, but if I could George Lucas this episode and go in and change things, I would. And they have done this, and they have done this in a few comics, I think, where they'll show that room, but they'll have, like, I think the latest one, they had like a small picture of the 13th Doctor somewhere, and they had Capaldi, and they had Tennant.
They did. I remember that.
So
no, because I think they did. I think they went back and like redid like novelizations and stuff. And yes, they did mention 13 in that one, and that was pretty cool.
That's another thing that always really annoyed me in terms of just like River Song specifically, is that 10 is the earliest incarnation she's met, and it's just like
that she's met on screen.
Well, no, because she
she knows all of them. I'm pretty sure that she's met all of them.
Because the first episode where the Doctor meets her in his timeline is the library episode, because he had no idea who she was.
No, and that's a good plot point before River Song became Stephen Moffat's waifu Mary Sue. More on that several seasons later.
We'll get there.
Anyway, getting back on track. And then Mickey gets bored by a trash can.
I love it's so fucking.
It's so bad.
My favorite thing is that it burps at the end. There's just absolutely no reason for that, but I love that it's there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the cherry on the top of that whole sequence.
It's just like, whoa!
Once that happened, I was just like, chef's kiss.
I love that, like, the plastic effect on that is like, it's not too far off from like 90s FMV game CGI. It's so fucking like, wow, this is the best you can come up with. And like, I forgot too that like he gets like stuck to it and it gets all like elastic. Like it's so bad.
My favorite, like, not obvious thing is that no one holds the top of a, like, can, or, like, I guess they call it a bin. Yeah. No one holds it like that. They just have them there because, like, that's the only way you plausibly get stuck to it. And I was just like, Noel Clarke, Mickey
the only
Smith,
way that you could plausibly get stuck to it and then have it for you.
Exactly. I was just like,
when you're behind,
you, man.
You're safe.
I like how then it also like somehow gets him like to a completely different location and switches him out with a new one in like the time that she's gone.
One cop, like, can we just talk for a minute about how if they can do sleeper agents that well to the point that like, it's not perfect, but like for we can talk about how Rose doesn't notice anything's up, whatever.
He's literally like fucking made of plastic because she doesn't notice.
But like, and he can talk and everything, and the other ones don't talk. Like, I think there might be. Yeah, actually, yes, there is, because the Roman Autons in season 5. But like, there's this weird thing where like, aside from those, it's just that one Mickey. And the Roman Autons too, like they're actually like sentient, like people who are like actual sleeper agents, whereas he's like this just like Richter Mortis grin Ken doll version of Mickey.
I think we're missing the bigger point here in that the reason Rose doesn't notice any difference is because she's actually a terrible partner for him and doesn't care about him. And, Mickey, I have more evidence for that at the end of the episode. But also...
Yeah, man, Mickey gets the short end of the stick in this season. It's funny, too, because he becomes such a good character in season 2. Yeah. But he gets fucked over big time in this season.
So much.
He goes He goes from a wannabe
Yeah.
Chad to an actual Chad at the end of like season 4
Yeah.
or like end of time, whatever you want to say.
I'm pretty sure he shows up in No, he doesn't show up in Torchwood, but he wrote a Torchwood episode.
Oh, really?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the Weevil Fight Club one.
All right. Well,
That doesn't make sense to anyone who hasn't
I
watched
have not
Torchwood.
actually watched Torchwood.
Neither have I, like at least not that far. So
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the pizza restaurant where she finally just
Yeah.
noticed, like he drives her all the way there and he's swerving
Yeah.
everywhere and she just doesn't
Yeah.
care and they literally sit down to eat and it's only
And
when she-
he's literally like, tell me everything about this person that you met, please. I need to know for reasons.
and she's just like, oh, are
And
you
then
jealous?
nobody notices that the doctor walks up with a fucking champagne. And then there's the weird thing where the cork hits him with enough force that his head absorbs it. Like, I don't think, like, admittedly, I am 18, so I'm not of legal drinking age. But I don't think even if you shake champagne up that it has that much pressure that it will just completely like go in.
hey, it's space champagne.
Yeah.
Of course, yes. It's actually
Or it's
a
yeah,
high-tech
or it's-
champagne bottle that the doctor brought back from the
Yeah.
Time War. It's a sophisticated weapon.
either that or it's really weak latex.
Well, but then he turns around and he makes his little wedge arm and smacks the table in half. So
Yeah, it's so like it's like no, his arm turns into a fucking like Minecraft arm.
he's a Roblox character.
Guys, Mickey was in that one Kanye West video all along.
Oh no.
And then
Also,
Yeah.
apparently, like, Plastic has, like, a preference for pizza because she's like, pizza or maybe Chinese, and he's like, no, pizza.
they just really wanted that pizza, man.
Yeah.
I feel like the Autons learned from their mistake because they were just like, okay, this fell apart too quickly. When we do the Roman crap, we need to spend a little bit more time
Yeah.
sorting out the kinks in this thing instead of it just going for like the least like complex thing it can do.
Yeah.
Sorting out the kinks, woo.
Yeah. Anyways, then they run out and you finally get to see the interior of the TARDIS, and I will forever have a spot to this grungy alien looking TARDIS interior that they had throughout the entire RTD run. It is
Well,
it
it changes
still remains
between
my favorite.
it changes between 9 and 10 though, but it does still keep that aesthetic, yeah.
It changes very minimally if it changes.
No, I can look it up right now. I'm pretty sure it had a pretty significant change.
No, it didn't. It changed from 10 to 11 because 10's regen wrecked the console room.
Yeah.
But between 9 and 10, it stays the same.
I think the lighting might change a little bit, but even
Yeah.
that, it's like
Yeah,
the core
set
look is
itself
classic.
the set itself is the same. And there's also, when you watch this show, everyone has their bigger on the inside moment, and I always have a soft spot for this one just because of the line, the assorted hordes of Genghis Khan couldn't get through that door, and believe me, they've tried.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a classic.
Like, I have always remembered that line.
And it's pretty ironic considering the last episode.
Yeah. Oh no, shit gets in all the time. I think shit even gets in at the end of this season, but yeah. Also that fun moment where the Doctor just completely doesn't see the London Eye.
Oh, well, I mean, he sees it, but it doesn't click for him, and I think that's
Yeah.
a good moment where it's just like, oh yeah, having a human perspective can help sometimes because
Yeah.
he's thinking like an alien, like what big giant alien looking contraption are they using? But no, it's
Yeah.
just they repurposed a human structure.
Yeah.
I think it's
Also-
that's also funny. Yeah. go.
Well, go with what you were saying because I was just gonna push ahead. So if you
Okay.
have something, go ahead.
No, like the the fact that I think it's part of the cheese factor that you look at like a Ferris wheel and just like, okay, like really there's no way that like, yeah, it's a dish, but like you don't expect a plate to be able to transmit something.
Yeah.
So it was just like one of those things where I was just like, yeah, I'll go with it. And it's a good moment because it shows that like Rose can still like
no, it
get
shows
on his
why he
level in
needs
some
other
ways.
people, because
Exactly.
he gets locked in his own head too much. But yeah, there's another. I guess we can start up a new a segment of New Who being really horny on Maine, or at least a lot less sanitized than it is now, where the doctor's like, plastic, everything waiting to come alive, and Rose makes a throwaway line about commenting on like breast implants.
That's funny, but it also was really horrifying to me once I thought about it for a few seconds, and then I stopped.
Yeah. So then they you go down and you see the Nestine consciousness with some great, like, okay, there are like videos floating around on YouTube of like low budget films with like really bad stock CG, like badly blue screened in. And I hate to say it, but that's what the Nestine consciousness in
It
this
really
scene really
does.
looks like. Like, it does not visually fit. Like, the lair itself, it's pretty decent. It does not fit in the lair very well. It looks really bad.
It just like it. The edges especially are just like
Yeah, you can tell there's some stanky chroma keying going.
Yeah, I mean at that point it's like, what are you gonna do? Like dodgy CGI or have like a guy in a stupid like blob costume? I was just like, you probably made the right choice.
Yeah, no, my dad. I was talking to my dad today. I was talking to my dad earlier about the dodgy CGI, and he commented on like, there's this episode that both of us know that it's a Fourth Doctor episode. I believe it's the Ark in Space, where there's like this infection, but they chose to like represent the infection as this as fucking green screen, not green screen, green spray painted bubble wrap, and it's very obviously bubble wrap. So
I love shit
yeah.
like that from like old Star Trek and old Doctor Who, where it's just like,
Yeah.
slap some tinfoil on a guy and call it a bot, and that's
just slap
basically-
tinfoil
that's what
on
the
egg
fucking-
cartons. There you go.
That's the fucking Cyberman.
Yeah. Oh, there's a great line in here where he's having his technobabble, but he you infiltrated the civilization by needing warp shunt technology. So may I suggest, with the greatest respect, that you shunt off. And there isn't like, I don't remember that many instances of him snarking with the technobabble that much, and I feel like they should bring that back because that's really good.
Yeah, it's a good way to humanize it and not make it just sound like some like clinical sci-fi world building bullshit, because while I find that interesting,
and they do that all the time. Like they do the technobabble all the time, and they don't bring that levity to it. And I find it interesting that it's really good, but maybe it was a once only thing. It didn't work again.
Can I just say that I absolutely love the part where he's talking to the Nestine consciousness, and you sort of get the backstory of how the consciousness ended up here. Like, clearly its planet was destroyed and now it's like here. And he just sort of goes like, don't talk to me about constitutional rights, which implies that the Nestine consciousness made an argument that it was their right to invade a planet. And it's just like some more good political commentary there.
Libertarian Nestine consciousness.
Like, yeah, I'm just like defending myself against a possible aggressive strike by humans by invading them first. Political commentary.
Yeah.
I
Also,
do like in that scene. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I have a big long story to tell, so go ahead with what you have first.
Okay, so the fact that like in that same scene, there's once it realizes that he is a Time Lord by seeing the TARDIS, it freaks out, and I obviously
it flips the fuck out.
Yeah, and obviously there's some like, we understand more and more through especially the Russell T Davies era, like why that is, but even going so far to like the story of the Eighth Doctor's regeneration, how just that girl hearing that he's a Time Lord makes her want to die. Yeah. And like also take him out with her. It's like, it's very clear the state of the Time Lords at this point.
Yeah, no, and they're having a polite, well, a relatively polite conversation, and then it finds the TARDIS and it flips the fuck out and it immediately grabs him.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it just sort of reminds you like, oh yeah, the Time Lords are kind of like war criminals.
Hyper competent war criminals.
Yeah. And it just sort of reminds you like, oh yeah, they're sort of like on par with the Daleks in the universe.
So I have two things. One's just an observation, and then one is this weird story. So my observation is this: first episode, dude gets fucking murdered in front of his family. Clive is dead.
I refuse. In my head canon, he's not, but yes, he's obviously dead.
Like, that is surprisingly, like, in this otherwise cheesy episode, like, that's a surprisingly dark moment in an episode where, like, nobody else, like, is really shown dying. Like, Jackie's never really in any danger. Like, it cuts, like, she's seconds away, but of course there's nicking time. Like, Jackie doesn't die, Mickey doesn't die. They kill off the one named character that wasn't important this episode.
He just gets like absolutely fucking murked too. Like,
yeah, it's bad. Holy shit.
I have to wonder when they found the time to put guns in all the mannequins, because I'm just like, you can't tell me they can make plastic guns. I mean, now you can, but that was funny.
Yeah, no, it's metal. You can see the metal lining of the barrel. Anyways. And then, okay. So this is a weird fucking story. So basically every single time I have seen this episode, I have seen it on the exact same copy of my DVD box set of season 1. Back to the first time that I watch it. However, I swear to God, I have a visceral memory of this. The first time I watched this episode, the resolution was different. And I do not, it's like this glitch in the Matrix where every single time I've seen it, it's been consistently, like, it's just that one time where I swear it was different. And I can never explain why. It's just like this warp in the Matrix. Like, I vividly remember the first time that I watched it. Like, it's like, because, you know, the climax is, you know, Doctor's got the anti-plastic, but he's being restrained by the Autons. And then Rose, you know, has her speech about how she's got nothing but a gymnastics medal, which is a good line, and then swings in, and when she hits him, he fumbles the anti-plastic and it drops onto the nesting consciousness. I distinctly remember. So in my memory of the first time that I watched this episode, it's like he's being restrained and somehow she has the anti-plastic and he's yelling at her, like, you know, like, do it, like, and she hesitates, and then eventually she does do it, and that's just how it ends. And I cannot for the life of me, like, I've never, like, found anything on it, but I have this vivid memory of it, and I don't understand how. So that's a weird story.
Good aside.
Yeah.
And I mean,
how
that's how the conflict with the nesting consciousness ends, and then, you know, little bad CGI boy fucking melts and shit.
Which is funny because he's already molten looking.
I want to think that anti-plastic is just the Doctor trying to show off, and really it's just like some type of acid, because anti-plastic makes no sense. But
yeah, anti-plastic is a terrible fucking. Well, okay, it's a good band name, but as the name for your like, get out of jail free MacGuffin, like, okay, to be brutally honest here, the actual monster plot in this episode isn't great. But that's okay because it doesn't need to be great. It just needs to work enough to set everybody else up.
And, you know, I think that's sort of like a recurring theme in this first season. Like, the actual monsters themselves tend to be like pretty easy to deal with. Yeah, it's just like a lot of character stuff that drives this season.
Yeah, no, and in general, I think, and even just like inventive or interesting monsters tend to not be on character heavy episodes.
Yeah.
Blink is not a character heavy episode.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And for bringing back the show, you just need something that's able to bring all of our main players together. And
and
again, in
it's
that aspect,
nostalgia
it
bait
doesn't
too,
stop.
because the Autons were prominent during especially the 70s. So it
Yeah,
works. It's effective. It's still scary, because imagine a universe where Russell T Davies decided to pick, out of all the classic Doctor Who monsters to bring the show back, he decided to go with the Zygons or something, and he didn't go with the sleeper agent, very sort of paranoia thriller style Zygons that Moffat did, and he just had them be these like alien shapeshifter dudes with dodgy costumes. Imagine if that's how he brought back the show.
That would have been really funny, not gonna lie.
So yeah, the Autons are still effective, and they're a nostalgic enemy. So it doesn't matter that it's resolved really easily, because it gives that still gives that burst of nostalgia while introducing what's new.
You know what Davies era alien I've really fucking missed right now? I miss the Centaurans. Like, when are we getting them back?
Okay. So the Sontarans are actually they're classic era.
Are they? Well, I mean, I just meant that they like featured prominently in the Russell T Davies era.
And I mean, you get Strax. I think part of the problem was it's kind of hard to make the Sontarans on their own interesting, because they're kind of goofy as fuck, and of course, obviously with Strax they lean into it.
Yeah.
It's by just making him a complete like non-threat to the main cast. So I think that's why they haven't done the Sontarans as much, because they're goofy as fuck and they have a really obvious lame weakness.
Okay, but I want them back.
That is fair.
At this point, I think the only thing that could really like revitalize them is that if whether Chibnall or like some future creative down the line does to the Centaurans what Russell T Davies helped do with the episode Dalek, which we will get to.
I wasn't going to say Dalek, because they didn't really need a reinvention. No, what I was going to say was Rise of the Cybermen: Age of Steel.
Mm.
That could also work, yeah.
Yeah, because the Daleks they didn't get changed that much, whereas the Cybermen, they got a very visible upgrade. Their suits were obviously much more like impervious, strong metal armor. They got a lot more sort of imposing with their size and just the sound of their movement. I'd say it would be more like that, or something, one of the other ones that they pulled out, maybe the Ice Warrior in that one submarine episode.
But we'll get to all that later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to sort of wrap up this episode with the final scene?
Yeah. Rose just kind of dips on Mickey.
She fucking does. Like
her mom.
She because like he's just like want to come with her, and she's like sort of this weak ass like no. She's like,
I have to take care.
Like
I have to take care of my pet human.
I have to take care of them.
Yeah. And Doctor's like, okay, sure, and then he leaves. And then for him, like 100 fucking years pass, and he comes back and he's like, oh yeah, it travels in time. And she's like, well shit, why didn't you say that earlier? And she just fucking dips on Mickey.
And in my mind, like right now, the way I'm headcanon this is that he saw it as a pretty insignificant reaction, as like a pretty insignificant interaction, and then he just sort of like fucks off for 100 years, and he gets bored one day. He's like, wait, fuck, what happened with that one girl? Like, shit, I didn't tell her it travels in time too, and he just sort of like pops back, and that's my headcanon for it.
Yeah.
And we kind of joke about like Rose being kind of flaky, but it's for this reason. I mean, I'm about to maybe drop an unpopular opinion, but I don't really like Rose is a weird character for me, but it's for reasons like this that I don't really like her, especially like towards the end of series 2 and kind of sort of when she comes back in series 4.
She very much stagnates and just kind of becomes her entire purpose for existing as the Doctor, which is kind of skeevy on RTD's part. But I think in this episode and early on, and I think she's the companion that the show needed to come back. because
agreed.
she's like, when you think about like the classic companions, like you kind of have two categories. You have like the capable smart one and then the pretty one who screams, and they kind of consolidated both of that into her, where she doesn't, she's not the screamer, and she is capable, but she's also very conventionally attractive.
Yeah, I think in the end of the day, it works for me because especially in this series, there are consequences for what she does, and she does grow a bit from that. And again,
and like
I
school
don't
reunion in season 2, it's just by the end of season 2, she's fucking stagnated.
And I think
definitely.
I think it's funny that like she's remembered so fondly as opposed to Clara, who like for sticking around so long. And she has the same problem where she just like sort of stagnates and stops changing.
Yeah, but I think Clara is Rose, but done better, because Moffat, as much as I will shit on Moffat for many, many things that he did in both Doctor Who and Sherlock, I will admit that I think the dynamic between 12 and Clara, and especially the fact,
so good.
Yeah, and the fact that the show did eventually call it out and basically say that it was toxic, and it led to her death, and it led to him flipping the fuck out. Yeah, I think that was good, and that never really happens. Like RTD never really, like, I don't know if RTD ever actually really views that as toxic, because in season 4, when she comes back, she's literally willing to basically destroy the boundaries between the universes just to see him again. And and her resolution is basically getting a clone of her boyfriend who's human and can age with her. Like, what the fuck, RTD?
I think, last I'll say is that I kind of like and don't like that the most examination that we have on the Doctor and Rose's relationship is in series 3 after she's gone. And that is kind of interesting, seeing
there's a little
the 10th Doctor deal with that.
There's a little bit in School Reunion, but yeah.
Also that too, but I don't like it because then that kind of like saddles some of Rose and her story onto Martha.
Yeah, no,
and
Martha
was done dirty.
Yeah. Martha and Donna were both done dirty, but we will talk about that later.
But yeah, those are
this
all my
episode
thoughts
is this episode is gonna be titled, but we'll get to that later. Oh yeah, I guess sorry for anyone who's like not viewing this as a retrospective, because we just did some big oof spoilers.
We want to each of us give this episode like a letter grade. I know things aren't that simple, but just to end it,
I would do it out of 10.
I would rate this episode really highly, but I wouldn't place it in like one of my top lists. Like, I think as much as this episode has some flaws, I'd still give it like an 8.5 or a 9, just because of the context of what it pulls off. Like, if this was Moffat's first episode or Chibnall's first episode, both of which I think are really good episodes, if it was either of those, and it was just this plot with this CGI or whatever on top of it, I don't think it would work as well, because the show had already been established. But for what is essentially a pilot, and also most shows pilots tend to run longer just so they can do that and get everyone introduced and devote a little bit more time. Hell, even Deep Breath is a longer episode than most of the rest of the season of Capaldi's first season. This episode is a standard like 45 minutes, and it manages to accomplish setting everything up. So I would give it like a solid 9.
I guess I'll go next. I would honestly probably give this one an 8.5. I agree a lot with what you said. I think the context of the episode is very important, and I think it pulls off a lot of very interesting things, and it sets up a lot of very good dynamics that play across the season and other ones that play across the entire show. But like also, yeah, if this were not in the context it we're in, it wouldn't be that strong of an episode. And I think especially if you slipped it into just one of the later seasons, even beyond how it looks visually, like besides the fact that it would be aesthetically jarring, just it wouldn't be that strong of a story. And I think there's a lot of fundamentally important things going on, but not much on top of that. It doesn't have much to say and doesn't really do anything too interesting beyond just the setting up the dynamic that's present in all the episodes in this season anyways. So I think 8.5. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I would probably echo most of your sentiments just because of the context of and what it did in bringing everything back. I'd say with the combination of recontextualizing, having the modern London, having the modern characters, the chemistry between those characters, the music, and we joke about the CGI, but for the time, it was, pretty good for TV.
Yeah. Especially and especially because, the BBC was not handing out
Most definitely not
big budgets for most of it.
Yeah.
My mom pointed this out too, of like how in a post Game of Thrones world where that was getting big movie budgets from the get-go, like TV before that was not getting the same level of funding.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I said, all of that combined with I'd also say the music, because music is important for framing like virtually everything.
Yeah,
I'd give it using your rating system, I'd say a 9, and using my own, I would just give it like a solid A. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So next week, hopefully, I have no idea when this episode is going to go up because I have to edit it and we have to do a bunch of other admin stuff. But whenever the next episode comes out, we will be covering the end of the world, which is, your standard. You get a jaunt into the future and then a jaunt into the past, or vice versa. And I have not seen this episode in like 4 years, so that's going to be fun. This is one of the episodes I've skipped. This is one of the episodes that I've skipped pretty handily and just been like, no, I want to get to the good stuff. I want to get to Empty Child or whatever.
Okay, fuck you. This is one of the episodes I really like.
Okay, and I mean, hey, I will probably like it too. I have not seen this episode in a long time.
Yeah.
It'll be a time. 2005 TV is always a time.
Yeah. And I guess to sign off, right here, I will put a overdubbed recording of whatever the handle is. We haven't made it yet.
Future Jeff here. You can follow the podcast at B2TARDISPod on Twitter.
And then my Twitter is at WheatleyDL.
My Twitter is at SkyHigh9_5.
And I mean, I'm probably going to post this on my Twitter anyway. But it's if you don't follow at Big Avery.
So yeah, this is a good first episode. I have no idea what we're gonna do with this in the future. We came up with this idea literally 24 hours ago. So yeah. If you are someone who is not directly connected to Skyler, Avery, or I, and you stumbled upon our show, please stick with it. We're somewhat professional, I swear.
Professionals in training.
We're learning. And see y'all next week.